21 and 16.
Okay.
All right, may I proceed?
Yes.
On a warm July night, the defendant found an opportunity to turn his desperation into action. He found an opportunity to express his anger. He found an opportunity to seek revenge on Miss Megan Ivantrell. Today, ladies and gentlemen, you heard that he seized that opportunity. That he did all he could to express his anger, to express his pain. That he stood behind their home and let the flame of anger in his heart ignite into a massive fire that consumed the Eigenroth home and stole the life of young Tammy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, today Joshua Wallace has been charged with the crime of first-degree murder. At the beginning of today's trial, Mr. Hicks came before you and said that today we would prove that Joshua Wallace intentionally and maliciously set that fire to the Eigenroth family home. And that as a result of that fire, young Tammy Eigenroth lost her life. That we would prove that the defendant set that fire. And that we would do so by proving this to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, at the beginning of this trial, Ms. Harrington came before you and said that, described this burden of proof as a nearly insurmountable obstacle. As an obstacle even the most experienced prosecutors with the strongest case would be unable to conquer. But today, ladies and gentlemen, the prosecutor's office embraces this burden. We know the merits of our case. We know what the evidence showed you today. It showed you that Joshua Wallace is guilty of the crime of first-degree murder. That on July 20th, he allowed his desperation to be turned into action. And that because of his actions, Tamara Eigenroth lost her life. Now today, ladies and gentlemen, you first heard about his desperation. We call this his motive, the reason why Josh Wallace wanted to harm the Eigenroths, the reason why he was behind their house on July 20th. You heard that he had been in a romantic relationship with Megan Eigenroth, that they had been together for a period of time close to 3 years. Ms. Eigenroth had invited Joshua Wallace into her home, into her daughter's life. She invited him in with dreams of a long romance, maybe a marriage. But you heard that on July 20th, those dreams, they turned into nightmares as her home was consumed in flames. You heard that 3 weeks prior to that fire, Ms. Eigenroth had broken up with the defendant. She had tossed him out of her house, tossed him out of her life. She had moved on. But today you heard the defendant, he hadn't. He called, he texted. He did all he could to try to win Miss Eigenroth back. But what you heard today is she wasn't going back. On July 19th, she put the rest of his belongings, the last of the things he had left at her house, out on her porch. Joshua Wallace came and picked up these items and again tried to win her back. She wasn't going back. Now, Joshua Wallace knew this. That's when he went behind that home and sat there with his dog. The night of the fire, he was behind her home drinking beer and thinking about the life that he didn't have anymore. Looking at the home that wasn't his and allowing his desperation to grow. Desperation that would soon find an opportunity to be turned into an action. You heard from Detective Dillinger today that the 3 things Joshua Wallace needed to turn his desperation into action that night were all within his reach. You heard about his hiding spot, you heard about his weapon, and you heard about his target. his hiding spot, the path behind the Eigenbrock home, a path through a dark forest that on July 20th provided the perfect cover for Joshua Wallace, provided him an opportunity to hide what was really going on, to hide his pain, and to sneak up right behind the Eigenbrock home. But that path didn't just lead to the back of their house. It led to the back of a house that Josh Wallace used to live in. You heard that when Detective Dillinger found Josh Wallace, he was right near that path, that he was muddy, that he smelled like gasoline. Today you heard why he smelled like gasoline, ladies and gentlemen. You heard about his weapon, a fireball, a Molotov cocktail. Detective Dillinger called it a poor man's hand grenade. You heard it was a bottle filled with gasoline or some other accelerant that is then lit on fire and thrown at a target. The bottle shatters, flames consume that target. That's what Joshua Wallace made that night. You heard about how he made that weapon, the glass bottles found in his hiding spot on that path. You heard about the gasoline can found right at the end of that path, at the home that he used to live in. And you heard about the lighter that was found in his backpack. All three things that he needed to take his opportunity and create that fireball. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, you heard about his target, the Eigenbrock home. A home that on July 20th, as he stood out back, symbolized everything that he would never have. A wife, a girlfriend, a daughter. That night, that home created this despair. It ignited this flame inside of him. The same flame that he held in his hand and hurled through the window. Heard about how Megan Eigenbrock saw these bottles come through her window. Heard about the glass found inside the home by Detective Dillinger. Now, ladies and gentlemen, today the defense tried to point the blame, tried to find someone, anyone, to shift the blame away from the defendant. And they called two witnesses today. The first was an old friend of the defendant. An old friend who decided 3 months after this fire to go to the police with a story, with a tale. A tale that you heard today was ripe with inconsistencies. But what he couldn't tell you today was why he waited 3 months. He couldn't tell you what time Joshua Wallace left that bar. He couldn't tell you where Joshua Wallace went after he went that bar. All unexplained things, ladies and gentlemen. You heard that Mr. Saunders said he had known Joshua Wallace for nearly 20 years, that they had been in high school together. But that contradicts the statement that Josh Wallace gave to the detective. He said he didn't know Mr. Saunders very well. That night he didn't know his name, didn't know his contact number, didn't know anything about it. But somehow 3 months later, this man comes forward, says he spent time with Josh Wallace, Tamara Eigenbrock, Megan Eigenbrock. Inconsistencies, ladies and gentlemen, that cast a shadow of deceit on everything that man told you today. Inconsistencies that could not be explained when he first came to the police, and inconsistencies that you're left with today. Now, the defense called Mr. Michael Pennington to try to muddy the waters with this, what he calls science of cell phone towers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you may be familiar with a GPS. You probably have one on your phone or in your car. What Michael Pennington showed you today was not a GPS. It doesn't track locations. It doesn't tell you where something is at a certain time. It doesn't give you an address. All it gives you is a best guess. It doesn't track how a phone moves after a phone call is made. We We showed you today how the phone signals jump from tower to tower. Within 1 minute of calls being made, they're popping up all over the map. What that shows you, ladies and gentlemen, is the only thing that he can reliably show us is that Josh Wallace was by Miss Eigenroth's home on the night of the fire. That he was somewhere near her home. That's the only thing he can tell you reliably. He can't tell you what cell phone tower he was by. He can't tell you what pie wedge he was in. All he can give you are guesses and estimates, and that's not science, ladies and gentlemen. Now today, we did not have to prove to you that Josh Wallace intended to kill Tammy Eigenroth. We did not have to show you that he wanted to hurt her. All we had to show you is that he stood behind the Eigenroth home on the night of July 20th and intentionally and maliciously threw those Molotov cocktails and caused the home to burn down. And that as a result of that, Tammy Eigenroth lost her life. And today we showed you just that. We showed you that on the night of July 20th, Joshua Wallace went to that home with a purpose. It was his target. That he stood behind that home with the weapon he created, intent on doing evil. That when he threw those bottles, the house became consumed in flames. Flames that you saw leapt all the way up to the roof of the house, through the windows, along the sides. Flames that quickly raced down the hallway and arrived at the door of Tammy Eigenroth. Now, Tammy was asleep at that time. She didn't realize there was a fire, ladies and gentlemen. You heard that she was found in her bed where Megan Eigenroth had last seen her. That she inhaled the smoke from those flames that the defendant caused, and she passed away that night. That was Josh Wallace turning his desperation into action. That was Josh Wallace finding an opportunity to express his anger. But today, ladies and gentlemen, you have the opportunity. You have the opportunity to tell Josh Wallace that no matter what the anger, no matter what the pain, no matter what the desperation, violent actions are never acceptable. You have the opportunity to hold him accountable for his actions. Because on the night of July 20th, it wasn't just a poor man's hand grenade that went through that window. It was an angry man's hand grenade. It was a desperate man's hand grenade. It was a desperate man's only chance at getting revenge. Find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder.